Hello, hello. Black Bean Samson here. Morning. It is November 28th. About 9 o'clock. A little after 9. Sitting here waiting for another tech to come by to drop off some stuff for me. So I can go do some actual work. um, so, what I want to talk about is this gene editing. Gene modifying. It is a very interesting thing that it's been talked about for several decades actually, and finally there's been an open experiment essentially that has finally has been done. There's always been a lot of ideas that people have been messing with human genome and modifying and seeing what that would do to an embryo for a lot longer than this happened. But finally, they actually did they're doing a full birth. Which is actually fascinating too, because they made the baby HIV resistant, which is, I mean, that's pretty cool. That's pretty interesting. I'm not sure exactly. I didn't go through all why he did that or why they did that. Though I have a CNN report. Pretty much the headline says Chinese gene editing scientist defends his research, rises the possibility of a third baby. So two of them they already spoke about, and now they're talking about a third one. And it says right here, the Chinese scientist who sparked international outcry after alleging to have helped create the world's first genetically edited baby, has raised the possibility of a third child being born after announcing the separate woman was pregnant at an early stage with a modified embryo. Interesting. I don't know if I could ever pronounce this person's name. I'm going to try. I don't know. I'm going to slaughter it. But Yunkui. I'm probably pretty sure the J isn't pronounced in Chinese. So it'd be Jiangui or something. But Yunkui or something like that. Whatever. Publicly defended his work, saying he felt proud of his. I mean, he should be proud. If he is the first successful full fledged birth of a baby, and it comes out perfectly healthy, and it has the ability to be HIV resistant, that is awesome. And I think anybody who tries to criticize that is just jealous. I mean, they're literally jealous. Like jealous. Like jealous. I mean, it'd be a different story if, like, for some reason these were like she was the last race of some island or people or something. It'd be different in that case. But it's not. It's a billion Chinese people. It's just like if you had a billion mice. Go ahead and test one or two off of one or two of them. If something happens, something happens. If it's good or bad, well, we'll take it. Well, actually, if it's a positive or a negative, either or, it's good because we know the result, the final result of the hypothesis essentially of the testing, the methodology, and then we know what to correct. That is what is good about it. And gene editing is, like I said, has always been talked about for decades. To suddenly, and there has been criticism that's come out, and it's strange because it is other scientists, and it's like, why are you guys criticizing this? Here, let me actually see if I can find. See, this time I get to actually look stuff up and check things out. There's a Boston area scientist criticizes Chinese. Let's check that one out. Alright, so this is Boston Globe. Boston area scientist criticizes Chinese researchers who changed embryonic DNA. So, that's interesting. Is the embryonic? See, all these words really mean something too. When you're dealing with, especially when you're dealing with certain ideological people that are writing stuff, words play a huge role because they actually make sure they use roles to incite things in you. And this is the first time I actually read this word, embryonic DNA. So, was it the babies that are actually DNA changed, or is it the embryonic, like what they sit in? Because I think that's what they mean by embryonic. Excuse me. So, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, Feng Zhang, one of the inventors of CRISPR, which is what I'm going to get to here in a little bit, said the risk of editing DNA embryos seems to overweigh the potential benefits. Oh, so that's actually a positive criticism. Like I said, I'm going to get into it, but just to kind of summarize, CRISPR is the methodology, the approach to edit the genes, and it's been extremely successful in everything they've done so far. So there's like zero reason why it shouldn't work on humans. It's just understanding genes enough in humans to make the right changes so we don't have bad births and stuff like that, just or mutations, or a gene war where we're literally creating hybrid humans to be like 100 times, well, I don't know, 100 times stronger, but just like imagine like 3 times stronger than the average man, and it'd be a female. That would be actually scary, because the potential of the males at that point would be like 10 times the strength of a male, which is no reason why it can't be achieved, because the males that I'm pretty sure that were around, probably pushing around 10 to 15,000 years ago, like pushing past, I would say more migrational type people, or maybe the like mountainous type people that did a lot of traveling or whatnot. Those people were usually quite built. The cave, what was the Iceman that we undug and could see that he had tattoos, and that guy was incredibly built. He might not have been as strong as 10 guys, but I guarantee that guy was as strong as 2 to 3 average men. So I'm just saying, the potential of hybrid men and women, huge chance. That's something that could be feared for the future. Which is another thing I want to talk about. I don't know if I'll be able to do within this, but about the Chinese. Essentially, their population has gotten so big that literally their elder population is outnumbering their younger population. Essentially, the same problem that is happening in Japan, but just like Japan is being unspoken of by many. There's some out there that are speaking up about it, but there's many that aren't speaking up about this population issue that's happening in Japan and China. That's going to be soon to be really happening in China, and that's not good for the world, because you're talking about 1.5 billion people that suddenly can't wipe their own ass. That's not good. They're already a bad polluter as it is. We're going to see some more pollution that's about to happen. But back to the gene. So, which probably one of the coolest things too about this. So that guy was he was for it. I want to find someone that was against it. Oh, right here. Pioneer speaks out against genetic editing of baby in China. All right. So, on this is WBUR.org. I'm not sure what the headline is. Gene editing. Pioneer speaks out against genetic editing of babies in China. So I'll just read you the first paragraph and just read parts of throughout, just to kind of find out who is this person. Oh, I don't understand that. So they're trying to say speaks out against it, but they're giving me the same Feng Zhang guy, the other guy that I spoke about in the other article I just talked about. Creates an uproar. Well, give us all these scientists uproars. I like how they use all these. What are they? What's the descriptive word? Like it's an adjective or something like that, or whatever. But anyways, I'm not good at describing all that. But it's like these words like uproar, like that's like so. Now I'm expecting 100 scientists with pickets and getting in front of the scientists building of where they did all this research at and like start screaming and shouting and stop whatever. But, it's interesting too. I just thought of as all these this is Washington Post. Chinese scientists claim of gene editing babies creates uproar. But what's interesting is I wonder if they write up stuff like this when abortion happens. Umpteen abortions happened in Chicago this year. People are in uproar. like they don't. And who's uproar? Who's the uproar? I mean, uproar of what? From who? From scientists? From citizens? From the Chinese people? Who? People who could benefit from understanding gene editing? Like, could you imagine families who have actual just genetic issues, like heart problems, or say they have spina bifida? Well, I mean, there's just a litany of issues that people can have in their family. Suddenly just vanish. Non-existent no more. No. I don't know what that really means for the future, but I can say what it potentially means in the moment for that person. A very healthy, potentially good life. A better life than that we could ever imagine. I have had a appendix removed. All right, when I was when I was about 27 or something like that. So, if I could have been born with genetics that have stopped that predisposed issue from ever happening, then that would have been a good thing. Essentially, that also have been a really good thing for the cost of society, because the cost of that appendix removal wouldn't have to ever go on. It never have happened. That never would have happened. And then I was out of work for what? A couple of days after that. Like 3 days or something. Like 2-3 days. Like, I actually still worked because I worked for the cleaning service. You don't really get days off doing that. But, I used to put in like 12 hours a day. So if I go and do like a 2 or 3 hour clean, and I call that a day, that's not a work day to me. That's nothing. And maybe in some cases people shouldn't still do things when they're just after a surgery, but well, most people are not like me either. So yeah, this methodology called CRISP on gene editing is a phenomenal thing for the future. I can't find. See, even this one, the Washington Post, that creates an uproar. It starts off pretty much talking about the baby girls, Lulu, Nana. They were born a few weeks ago. It's the guy who did the editing. His actually first name is he, H-E. I wonder if that's how you even pronounce it there. I bet it's more like, hey, Shunke, oh, Shunke. I bet it's something like that. It's so interesting how language works. But Junke, whatever his last name is, Southern University of Science of Technology of China. Criticized by many scientists worldwide as premature and called rogue human experimentation. More than 120 scientists called the experiment crazy in a letter. Oh, here. Alright. It's about time. So one thing that drives me nuts, a lot of these articles will post things, and they won't really like straight up post things. Well, see, we still didn't. So let me just tell you right. The Washington Post gives you a link that says more than 120 scientists called the experiment crazy in a letter. So the part that says a letter is the link, essentially. It's in blue with a underline. And if you click on that, it brings you to Passport Wubu or whatever. I have no idea. I've never seen. And it asks for pretty much. It brings you to a login queue by the looks of it. Well, that doesn't help anybody who wants to essentially see. Oh wait, no, it finally did loaded. Okay. Okay, so if I'm reading this correctly, well, actually I should say if I'm looking at this correctly, if I'm understanding what I'm seeing, because all I'm seeing is Chinese characters. All these single lines with essentially it looks like 2 characters or three characters with a comma. Those are names. And then after it, it's probably like their profession of some sort, maybe like their last name or something. I don't know. That wouldn't be their last name. The first symbol should be their first name or their last name. So that next row should be after the column. That should be they're probably like their profession. If I was to guess, that's their profession. But if you look at it, this doesn't look at all. This doesn't look like at all as a professional document. This document don't look professional at all. This would have been a good podcast just to have done at home and just to show this, because this looks weird. Well, at least if you take snap pictures of it or screenshots. There's really nothing. There's nothing to really indicate of like if its professionalism, like of what degree of the significance of this supposedly digital signatures. I don't know. Anyways, if that's what Washington Post has for Chinese signing something, that's pretty freaking lame. And how do I know even those characters are actually names? I have no idea. No idea. Don't matter, though. Washington Post is full of lies, anyways. it's like they take truth and they what's the word for it? Inflate it. They take a story and they pull it out of context so they can get better ratings or something. It's I mean, there's a lot of media is doing that. CNN, MSNBC, Fox. You name it on cable television, they're pretty much doing it. There's one I heard. It's called Newsmax or something like that. I heard. I'm not sure. I've never heard about it. I mean, I never watched it, so I really don't know. But maybe that's one outlet that doesn't. I don't know. But it seems like a lot of outlets definitely are pushing not information, but an agenda. Or I should say, they're pushing information and slipping propaganda into it with it. So, gene editing. I want to get back to, I'm done with the criticizing. At this point, anybody who criticizes, I think we can pretty much all agree that, yeah, they could have concerns, but are their concerns truly legitimate at this point? No. And I'm going to say no for one reason. And I can get into it why more, but one reason from just reading or going through these articles real quick. Not one scientist that opposed it explained why, nor did they have an actual something to prove why that argument should stand, or why it should be, presented, or why we shouldn't be. There's just none. There's nothing of that. It's just baby got modified. Jealous scientists are now upset. That's it. I mean, that's all I'm finding mostly, which is sad because I would like to hear legitimate arguments against this. And the closest thing I could think of is what I came up with was a gene war, essentially making hybrid humans to fight wars and stuff. I don't know if that would be at all good. That's a whole, I don't know. Definitely not for me. Definitely not for me. But anyways, excuse me. Back to the CNN report. So he was speaking in front of a hall of 700 people at the International Summit of Human Genome Editing. And he did this on I'm guessing last Wednesday. And that's Hinkui. Excuse me. And yeah, it's fascinating because he made these. He took these when he announced in the video posted online that 2 abstinable, healthy twin girls have been born this month from embryos altered to make them resistant to HIV. So, right there too, in that paragraph, in that sentence, it's born this month from embryos altered to make them resistant to HIV. So the babies are not altered; it's the embryos. So literally, we're still not editing the babies directly. We're editing the embryos before it becomes the baby or whatever. That's actually interesting to understand. And why that's also interesting to understand is if any person who is for abortion at any time, or it doesn't matter, can't make the claim that this is bad. Definitely, none of those people can say that this is bad. Not one of those people. And maybe they can hold the argument of, like I said, for gene war and stuff like that. Maybe they can pull an argument, but they can't sit there and say this is bad and not make claim that what they do is not bad. All right, and that's for certain. I mean, for the fact that these are embryos, which would be classified during an abortion, not a human life. See that? You see how that works? And they will use that language against anybody that opposes them, essentially, or opposes their excuses that they want. So, some ethical concerns have been raised. His research has raised concerns, serious ethical questions around transparency of gene editing, and calls for a global binding code of conduct, which I agree, because he sees the potential for this. Imagine making people that all your kids come out with IQs of 150, 160, all top genius, top surgeon level type IQs. Like that's definitely unfair to disadvantaged people. Imagine poor people compared to rich people. Rich people are going to be able to afford the gene editing compared to the poor people. Poor people will not be able to perform as good. That means you will have that separation in wealth and power to a great degree. Alright, I had to stop there for a second. Pause it. My tech showed up with the labels. I'm on my way to go take a couple service calls that came in while I was sitting here. Which is nice because it actually gives me something to do for the day. Yay! I get to fix things. But, alright, so in that short time I was able to kind of scroll through, and what I found for actual concerns, like these are the most concerns, like the biggest concerns, like that I can identify looking through this really quick. Again, I wasn't able to go through the whole CNN report here, but who knows how much truth is in it? Who knows? So far, it does look like a little bit more reliable than the Washington Post, though. That I will admit. So what it looks like, one of the concerns is that Hugh, whatever his name, the guy who did this, he went and got consent from the patients by himself. He did this all on his own, or he was directly involved. They didn't say on his own, but they said right here in quotes, the simple fact that he was directly involved in trying to get consent from patients is a huge problem, said Robin Lovell Bad, I don't even know, head of laboratory of stem cell biology and development genetics at the Francis Crick Institute. So and then he says, you should never do that. You should have an independent third party who can properly explain the risks and the benefits. So that's kind of what I was thinking why maybe this guy was saying this, is that a third party allows a better argument to be made in court for lawful reasons. I don't think that's an ethical reason. I think that's just more of like, just have all your corners neat. Make sure you know all your edges. Make sure that you
are aware of all the potential risks yourself as the scientist, and by doing that, you're like making sure you know where all your P's and Q's are, and you're crossing all your T's and dotting your I's. Essentially, it's just an assurance. I think that's what that is, and also it's an assurance to the patients, or to the people they're being experimented on, quote unquote. You know, these people, a lot of them are very uneducated potentially compared to the scientists. So sometimes it's advisable to have someone that can actually translate into like layman terms, easier to communicate with these people. Some really smart people just have a hard time communicating with not as sophisticated people. When all your life you've done is read and write papers and do research and study, and you can't even really name like a movie or a TV show. And there's people out there like this. And then compared to someone who were raised in front of a TV and never read a book, or read maybe a book for school, but those people are fundamentally going to have most likely a different communication skills. Even if they're potentially the same IQ level, they're going to have a different a degree of how they use their language. And then if you change that IQ a little bit to extreme, well, I guarantee you're going to have a very difficult time on talking to people. So yeah, it's a. Anyways, gene editing will fix that. Everybody will be smart, right? Everybody will be smart. So yeah, one of their concerns was the fact that it wasn't the actual experiment, but more or less the question on, was it ethical or was it right for him to be part of it directly on getting consent? I mean, whatever. Someone has to do it. Maybe no organization wanted to get involved in that. Maybe too many of them have whatever reasons. Whatever reason, it doesn't matter. It happened, and I think they need to get over that part. But they're also one of their concerns that I could say that is legitimate, and I didn't think of at all. Of course, why would I? I'm not a gene scientist. So, I guess the CCR5 gene is crucial to the human immune system, and supposedly removing it could increase the risk of susceptibility for other diseases such as the West Nile virus and the influenza. I didn't even think those were compatible beyond going and getting treatment from a hospital. So, I mean, who cares if that's the issue right there that you guys are worried about? For them editing out HIV. So whereas this person, where people are susceptible to HIV, and most are, to my knowledge, are susceptible to the West Nile and the influenza, suddenly it's a big issue that 100% resistant to HIV, but potentially that's a problem. I mean, I get the concern on it because you're messing with the human immune system. But in which way? Was that gene totally removed? Was the gene that gene itself edited? Was it replaced with something else? See, that's the thing. They don't go into exactly, and I don't expect any news really to go into that explicit of a detail. That would be more of the research data coming straight from the scientists, essentially. But that we don't know. We don't know what they're doing right there. If I was to guess, they're not just removing a gene and just leaving it blank. And so your DNA is just, it looks perfectly synchronized until you get to one spot, and then there's just part of it missing, or missing chunks. But no, they fill it in. They fill it in with either things that are like, come on. I mean, this guy literally, this world drives me nuts with driving sometimes. I mean, literally, this person creeps out of a green light. Creeped. Like, who does that? Like, it's just irritating. It's not like you got an old car that can only creep out of somewhere. Brand new vehicle. That's my road rage. People got places to go. I mean, you should see the whole line that was behind me. Like, this is the reason why people like scream and cut people off. And but anyways, so this gene that they're changing or doing something to is in effect of getting this HIV resistance. Well, again, they're not going into the detail of to get this HIV resistant. You don't get HIV resistant because suddenly you remove a piece of a gene. No, you get resistance usually due to adding something. All right, so this is why we take antibiotics, because by taking antibiotics, it's adding something to us to help combat the virus or whatever it is that we're fighting off. So, excuse me. So I can pretty much guarantee that they're not just removing something out of the DNA and leaving it blank. They're removing and then adding something to it. They're editing it. So, all right. I'm pretty much dealing with the concern part on this. So some people are trying to say this is a huge blow to the reputation of Chinese biomedical research. Who would say that? Please, give us the top name. I mean, they're saying 120 scientists. So out of those 120 scientists, the most recognized name out of that, please give us. Please. They're not, though. I mean, that's the thing. Those are 120 idiot failed scientists. And now why I say failed and idiot is the fact that they failed on achieving what this guy achieved. An idiot for not backing him up, for not supporting him. No, they're like trying to hopefully get some fame out of just waving their hands up and screaming. Oh, this is so wrong. This is so wrong. Oh. That shit, it boggles my mind on how people work like that. How can you be a scientist from afar, or I'm sorry, how can you be a scientist and from afar make a decision not knowing all the information? I mean, let alone all these scientists, those 120 scientists, act like they're part of the experiment, like they were part of the decision makings and stuff. But in fact, since this stuff was kept secret for this long and suddenly just brought to the picture, and they weren't part of it, that's why they're getting screwed. This is why they're condemning it. It's because they weren't part of the experiment. They weren't part of that secret invitation that this guy brought whoever together to make this happen. That's why I just can't imagine what else. I just literally can't. I can see your concerns and criticism, but to actually sit there and try to make claim that these 120 are in support of this makes or casts negativity on the reputation of China, that does not. That impresses me. And in my eyes, China has gotten that much better. I mean, the fact that I know they have been stealing American technology, but Look at what America's doing with it. Nothing. And that's pretty much because of our corporations. I should say, they're not even really corporations. I don't even know what the heck they are. They're some form of other entity that we keep on labeling as a corporation. But corporations at this point could be, it's anything, which is why they need to be called something else. They're like a hybrid corporation, where you get to like pretty much make secret dealings behind doors and with foreign nations and sell information and equipment and data and whatnot that could literally help take down a nation or help take down America. This is how bad it's getting, actually, and nobody's really realizing that. And now we have a gene war approaching. In the future, we'll have many kids that are like genius level, knowing how to make anything out of the most average basic household belongings. I don't know. It's going to be an interesting world here in the future. It's going to be interesting. So I want to talk about CRISP real quick before I get down here. Excuse me. Is that it? This has been kind of a long podcast. A little longer than I wanted. To be honest, I wanted this to be 10 minutes. I can never make them short. That has to be a skill in itself to make the podcast super short. I'm gonna have to do that. I'm gonna have to make one short just for this. But so CRISP is also known as or also called gene editing. It's the methodology, the technology that allows scientists the ability to change organisms' DNA. So if I'm going to read off part of right here. It says, the CRISP system works similar in lab. Researchers create a small piece of RNA with a short guide, in quotes, sequence that binds, in parentheses, to a specific target sequence of DNA in a genome. The RNA also binds to the CRISP enzyme, or they also call it the Cas9 enzyme, CAS9 enzyme. As in bacteria, the modified RNA is used to recognize the DNA sequence, and the Cas9 enzyme cuts the DNA at the target location. Although Cas9 is the enzyme that is used most often, other enzymes, for example, CPF1, can also be used. Once the DNA is cut, researchers use the cell's own DNA repair mechanism to add or delete pieces of genetic material, or to make changes to the DNA by replacing an existing segment with a customized DNA sequence. Now that was the most dangerous part of my podcast. Reading while driving. Don't do it. Don't do it. Alright. So, out of that, if you didn't really understood it, I want to kind of summarize what I read from past knowledge of learning a lot of this stuff. Excuse me. Excuse me. Alright. So, in our bodies, we already have something that allows us. I wish they exactly gave us the exact part, but we could just say the enzyme because they're calling the Cas9 enzyme, but and then there's the CPF1 enzyme. But the enzymes in our bodies, and I don't know if it exactly is the enzyme. It could be the globule or something. I don't know. Anyways, there's just part in our body, and that enzyme is like a zipper to our DNA. When we're being conceived as a baby, or when our cells are just dividing it's when we're making new skin, our cells are actually dividing, and it goes through this whole zipping of actual cells. So this process is constantly happening, actually, within us, constantly. But the most significant part of it, or I should say, what's the most significant part to the life part, is the actual conceiving part of it. Is when they takes two DNAs, opposite DNAs, and unzips each of those DNAs, and essentially removes what is necessary, or removes what it's that it's meant to removes out of both of those DNA, and then it brings those DNA together, essentially, and then it zips those DNA together in a way that gives us humans life. And essentially, genetic scientists have understood this for quite a while. So they took that literally natural, it's the natural gene editing. It's what nature already did this, already designed this organism, essentially, this enzyme, to essentially be an editor for DNA. And this is for all organisms throughout the world. All organisms are essentially, they're stuck by this nature of law when it comes to having their genes edited and stuff by nature. So what we did was we took that and we applied that by essentially giving it a set of guidelines. See, each one of these enzymes already has a set of guidelines. Interesting enough, nature has figured out how to actually give a set of guidelines, like programming, essentially. Programming a machine that edits and combines, let's just say photos. You have Photoshop, and this machine is designed specifically to edit photos and combine photos, and to make them to be original. And there's actually programs that kind of do this type of stuff, but it's specifically just made just for that. Well, that's what this thing is like, and you can come in now as a scientist and program these enzymes to do certain tasks. You want them to remove you want them to remove a gene that creates heart problems, or turn on a gene that stops heart problems. Boom, that can be done now. It can be done through this enzyme that goes through and not only does it like unzip and rezips, but it unzips and then able to remove very specific parts of the DNA. There's 4 parts to a DNA, essentially, and then there's the it's like the protein or something that holds the DNA together. There's like something that helps hold the DNA together, essentially. There's a couple things that hold the DNA together, and then the DNA itself, the outer parts. There's like 4 of them, like A, T, C, and D or something. I don't remember, but and what it can do is it can simply remove one of those DNA markers. It's very fascinating, It's very fascinating. And we've known this for a while. It's just that we've only begun doing these experiments in the last decade. I would say about a decade or so. Because we've been able to understand how to essentially program these enzymes to do what we want now. And that's where it's going to get fascinating. Because once we're able to understand how we can successfully edit DNA, I mean, there's nothing that can't be cured at that point. There's nothing that can't be, there's no health problem that won't be solved. This will be the Star Trek of things. I mean, we got now lasers coming out that are literally healing people, like taking cuts and sealing them up like they're like glue, essentially. To soon to be, there won't ever be a heart problem or overweight problem or spina bifida or physical or mental mutations and such. There just won't be no more of that. There shouldn't be no more of that after this crisp technology is perfected and understood completely. There's just no reason for it. This is the future. The final frontier on Earth is here. Accept it. Let's live it. Let's embrace it. Let's understand it. Let's not fear it. If you like this podcast, please like and subscribe. If you didn't like this podcast, please like and subscribe. If you disagree, or even if you do agree, or just like to rant and babble like I do, go ahead and comment below. I'd like to hear from you. Thank you. You have a great day. Bye.